So in this lesson, we're going to add some direct controls to the lip of our character. We're going to add them in such a way so that they follow all of the skin cluster deformations of the lip. So for instance, whenever the mouth opens, the controls will follow along, as well as when we flip the lips over using the skin cluster. These added controllers will follow this deformation here. How we're going to do that is we're going to use a polygonal strip which rides along this flat edge of the lip here, and it will duplicate the deformations of the standard lip skin cluster. So here we can see this lip mesh, which is a duplicate of the lip mesh from the main head rig. Now we're going to get this to follow along with the skin cluster deformations and then lock influences onto that deforming object. So that way the influences can follow along with the skin cluster, but we can avoid putting ourselves into a situation where we're ending up with a deformation cycle, because although the influences will match the skin cluster deformations of the lips, they'll be getting their transformation information indirectly, because this lip strip mesh will actually be the parent, or what it derives this motion from. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is create a series of rivets or places to lock influences onto this lip mesh. And we're going to use the rivet script. So once you've downloaded that or installed it from the DVD, you can either type in rivet, or as I have here, I've just placed that tool on my shelf here. And the way that tool works, and it's been around since I believe Maya 2, quite a while. So I'm going to go in and select two edges, and the rivet script will average the distance between the edge selections that you have and place a locator there. So when I hit the rivet tool, you can see we have a locator averaged right in between those two edge selections. So I'm going to repeat that again over in this corner. And one last time over here. Okay. Here we have our three rivets. So the next step, I'm going to group these together. So I'm going to create three joints, one for each of these rivet locators. You could use clusters, but you get into deformation issues, particularly when the lips curl over. A cluster will handle the end deformations, but you start to run into problems as you cascade back through the various joint transformations. So by using joints, it adds a little more skin cluster weighting work, but you don't have to deal with any deformation order issues. And we'll see that in a second. I'm just going to switch to a side view. Switch to a side view. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to select Skeleton, Joint Tool, and create three separate joint nodes. Okay, I'm going to quickly rename these using the Modify Search and Replace tool. Okay, just quickly add the JNT suffix here. Okay. Okay, so we have our 3 joints. So I'm going to parent each of them to one of the rivet locators. Middle mouse dragging and dropping in the hypergraph. Then I'm going to 0 their translations so that relative to their parents, these rivet locators, they have 0 translation offset. Okay, so they're riding right along the clusters here, or right along the locators here, which are in turn attached to this NURB strip, or polygonal mesh, I'm sorry. At this point, although the rivets and the joints are attached to this polygonal mesh, it's still not following along with the lips. So what I'm going to do is bind this to all the joints in the face. So this tool selects quotation mark asterisk, which is wildcard underscore JNT, and of course I've named all of my joints JNT that are going to be skinned. I'm going to deselect the joints that we've just added. Shift select the lip mesh and then select skin, bind skin, smooth bind. Let's open the option box. Here are the options I've used throughout the lessons here. Bind to selected joints. My bind method is closest distance. Just leaving my max influences at 3. Deselecting, maintain maximum influences after bind. And I'll leave my drop off rate to 4. So I'll hit bind skin. So when I select this lip geometry, I'm going to hide locators here. It's not quite following along. But that's easy enough to fix. What I'm going to do is copy the weights from the main face model, since it's a one-to-one correspondence. So I'll select the face first, shift select the lip geometry mesh, and then select skin, edit smooth skin, copy skin weights. Okay. Now let's look at our lip mesh again. We may need to take one more step to get this to track along perfectly with the lips. Let's see here. Yeah. So what we see is on one side of the face, it's deforming perfectly, but not on the right side. But that's an easy enough fix. I'm simply going to select all the vertices, deselect the center vertices, and simply mirror the skin cluster weights over from the left side to the right across the YZ axis. So with the vertices selected, the center vertices deselected, I'm going to select skin, edit smooth skin, mirror skin weights tool, and open the option box. We're mirroring across the YZ plane and from positive X to negative, from left to right. Let's hit mirror. Okay, so now both sides are tracking perfectly with the mouth. So now when I select these joints, they have no connection or influence on the head mesh. I'm simply going to add them as influences. So here I've selected the head geometry, and I'll shift select the 3 lip joints that I've just created, and then select skin, edit smooth skin, add influence. Let's open the option box for that. Let's reset this tool. Since we're adding joints, I'm going to disable use geometry. We're not adding geometry as influence at this point. We're going to add a joint. So I'll disable that. Everything else I'll leave the same except for weight locking. I want to enable lock weights. I want to explicitly go in and add these joints into the skin cluster and lock what I have previously painted. So I'll hit add. So now when we select the joints, you can see that the head mesh is highlighting, showing that there is a connection through the skin cluster. Okay, so I'm going to quickly paint these weights here. Select the head mesh, and you can either choose Skin, Edit Smooth Skin, Paint Skin Weights tool in the option box, or you can right mouse click on the mesh, select Paint, Skin Cluster. In this case, we only have one skin cluster. Then double click to open the Paint Skin Weights tool dialog box. And here you can see we have our 3 lip joints with their holds turned on. So we're going to select each one and then click on the toggle hold weights on selected to unhold them or unlock them. Then start adding in the weights here. So I'm going to go pretty quick here. Once again, this method will require a bit more work in terms of getting the skin clusters to play nicely together. But the upside is that you really don't need to think about deformation orders, since you're simply adding all this into the skin cluster. Some overlapping the influences here. That's where the center and left skin cluster meet. Again, I'm going very fast. And you can add as many of these joint influences to the lip as you feel necessary to get this character to deform the way you need it to. Okay, now let's add the third one here. Okay. Finish this off real quickly. Okay, so that's very quickly adding that in. So now let's select one of these joint influences in the lip. Once again, this is very rough weighting. Okay, so tug this around. Now let's test it on a more deformed pose. Let's open the jaw. Select one of these. Once again, because it's a joint, deformation order isn't really an issue here. And also being a joint, we have full rotational and scaling control. So it's fairly flexible. Okay, let's go a little further forward with the lip curl. And this introduces a problem with the cluster due to the multiple influences of the joints here. Okay, so once again, this is very crude weighting. It's all behaving fine. I mean, these are basically, world space transformations, but they're fairly intuitive since they basically conform to the normal of this lip mesh. So, very simple way to layer these lip deformations. so that they follow along with the lip. But then by simply attaching them to a duplicate object that matches the skin cluster deformation, you get these added lip controls to follow along without introducing a deformation cycle. Once again, I only added 3 here, but for the final rig, if you're using this direct control, I'd want to add quite a few more to the lip. Probably a total of 12. Maybe 2 more corner controls, and then a total of 5 on the top lip, matching the bottom lip. But they're just showing this method, pretty straightforward, once again, and because we're using a skin cluster, we do add the extra work of finessing the skin cluster in that area, but we avoid any deformation order issues. And if you try a similar method with standard cluster, probably a relative cluster, you'll see what I mean, particularly with the lip curl where we're having multiple joints. The cluster will sort of lose itself when it's trying to figure out the matrices or transformations of the multiple joints for that lip curl action. Very fast feedback and fairly intuitive since they're riding right along with the lips. So there's that direct control method, and next we're going to move on after this lesson to adding some corner controls and then fixing some of the flipping issues that you might get in that area.